E.B. White, the author of Stuart Little and Charlotte's Web, once said, "A writer who waits for ideal conditions under which to work will die without putting a word on paper." Maybe you've found yourself in some less than ideal conditions lately. However, that's not necessarily the end of the world. There's always something going on that keeps us from our writing, if you ask me. No matter how much we really mean to get to doing something, there's all sorts of things that stand in our way. Perhaps it is an unfortunate circumstance of not only writing essays, but all of life itself, that when you try to do something, circumstances are not going to be ideal. Something is always going to stand in our way. However, I'd like us to consider today that the things standing in our way, the circumstances we're in, our surroundings, are really where a lot of our motivation and ideas come from. My attendance question for you today is, what's the biggest thing holding you back as a writer right now? Take a second to answer that on the discussion board, and then we'll move on to continue this week's look at who we are as writers. As I mentioned last class, you have online presentations due this upcoming Wednesday, but that's nothing to fear, just a 3-minute video describing your writing process, very similar to the one that I uploaded yesterday. No fancy editing, no background music, no crazy references to 80s films are necessary. That is currently at the very bottom of our homework tab on BB Learn. Once again, scroll all the way down to Homework on BB Learn, and you'll see the submission file there. We're just going to do this as a discussion board question, so please submit on the discussion board. You'll be responding just like an attendance question, except that you'll need to attach a video file here at the bottom. On Thursday of next week, you'll be watching and responding to 3 of your classmates' videos on the discussion board. Now, in the meantime, I thought we should take a look at ourselves as writers so that we know really what to say when we create these videos for next week. That's why I've put together the writer's inventory for you to look at today. The main goal for your 3-minute videos next week is really just to tell me and the rest of the class what your writing process is like, but along the way, maybe you want to consider different things you think you're really good at, or maybe a few skills you might be able to improve on. Now, number 3 ought to help you as you go through the video. These are any little details along the way. Do you listen to music? What time of day are you writing? Any sort of things that come up during the writing process would be great to mention for number 3. For 4 here, I'd like you to describe your ideal working environment. I think it can be interesting to reflect on the location that we would want to work in if we really could work anywhere at all. Take a second to think about that for number 4. For number 5, I'd like you to consider your biggest influences. Anybody at all that might have had an influence on your writing, your work, or your life. These could really be any people, and I'd like you to consider their style, the way that they give information, their way of speaking, their way of making arguments, maybe their way of researching or conducting experiments. Take just a minute to think about how you could incorporate their own techniques into something you're doing, whether that's in English 105 or somewhere else. Well, that's all I have for you today. I'm really not looking for anything more than short paragraph response to all these questions, as well as your video coming up next week. Just has to be 3 minutes explaining how you write and maybe what you see as some of your strengths and weaknesses and where you want to go as a writer. So whatever sort of circumstances you're finding yourself in right now, I'd like you to consider how you intend to use your strengths to get through them, as well as the things that really ought to be best for you to be working on. Writing and revising an essay can feel like some epic quest at times. However, the real never-ending story is how you're revising your own ideas as a writer. That is how you're changing essay to essay and developing these skills, not just for the things we've been working on in English 105, but for your future classes. Even if the conditions you're working with aren't ideal, the key is to work with the strengths you've had inside yourself the whole time.
Show no fear, for she may fade away.